Welcome to another episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. I am your host, Kelly Melissa Reinhart, and I'm so excited for you to be here today. I think every single week I'm like, my guests are so great and I'm so excited, but really truly the whole point of the show is to bring access to people resources. This world is filled with so many people out there that are really truly making a difference in the lives of others that might be struggling to find their way, or maybe they just need an extra coach or a mentor or somebody in their life to help guide them through whatever they're experiencing, whatever they are walking through, the journey that they're on. And I know personally, I cannot underestimate or really understate how impactful mentors and coaches have been on my life. I know I've talked about it probably multiple times, or maybe you've heard me share a little bit about why I do what I do, in addition to the nonprofit and the loss of my sister. But really truly it was those coaches, those mentors that got me through the times that I didn't think I would even make it through, to be honest. And they were the ones that helped me up level, ultimately guiding me on this path that I never ever thought that I would be on. But it has been the most rewarding path and journey that I've ever experienced in my life. Really truly being able to make a difference in the lives of others, whether it is through education on mental health or suicide prevention, speaking on stages, which again, another thing I never ever thought I would want to do, being in the public speaking, but also even on a radio or TV show. I had no idea that was going to be the thing. And it really helped me up level and change my mindset around what I can and what I need to do to really spread the message that I know would truly impact and help people throughout their journey. So I just want to share that because my guest today is someone who can be that potential for you if you are looking for a coach or a mentor or somebody to help you guide you through the experience that you're going through. So without rambling more and more and more, like I like to in the beginning, I'm going to introduce my guest. So her name is Raquel Soto. She is an Amazon bestseller on prayer, master coach, and trainer for high achievers who want to break limits, beliefs, and experiences of life abundance. With over a decade of experience in coaching, Raquel has guided individuals through spiritual, personal, and business transformations. She is passionate about emotional fitness, and her 1% model helps her clients gain clarity, have a clearer mind, which allows them to make more money and have better relationships. We're going to talk a little bit more about how she became victim to toxic positivity, which led her to try to take her life 4 different times. And she really has been restored in all areas of her life and now helps restore others. So without further ado, Raquel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really excited to be here with you and your audience today.
Absolutely. So I know I just gave a very short snippet of what you do and really your story, but can you tell the audience a little bit more about whichever 2 you want to start with?
Sure. It was something that actually came to mind when I was thinking about, like, how did I get here? How did I get to the point where I tried to take my own life 4 different times, and supernaturally all 4 times I was stopped. And thankfully, I'm still here and didn't make that erroneous error that I was trying to do. And it was really around toxic positivity. So when I heard that phrase, I'm like, that's it. And for people like me who maybe are more wired to be very positive, very optimistic, or people who always seem strong, nobody knew. I had not started to share my story until a few years afterwards, which is more recent. And even my best friend, who's my sister, she had tears in her eyes, and she looked at me and she said, "What do you mean that you actually were in the process of taking your life?" And she started to weep. She's like, how did I not notice? And that's one of the things, is that when you are the one that everybody goes to, who do you go to? If you are the one who's always positive and looking for the silver lining and trying to make it work, then who are you going to in order to process your emotions? Because I was taught to just look at the bright side, right? And it had worked until it didn't. And that's the rub, is that when you are using the gifts and the talents and, developing whatever you were born with, and you see measures of success, you're like, well, this is the way then you should be going. And the quote that's coming in my head is from one of the coaches that really helped me on this path, Danny Johnson. And she said, the worst thing about success is a little bit. And that little bit of success that I was having was then, being the cheerleader of, yes, this is the way you should be doing it. But I had no idea that your negative thoughts are actually good. When you're aware of them, it's your opportunity. That's grace coming in. Like, oh, there's something here for you to look at. I didn't know the things about neuroplasticity. I didn't know the things I know now about neuroscience. I didn't know the things about how your brain works and how your thoughts actually create your emotions, and then emotions drive the actions. And had I known all those things, I probably would have gone down that path. It was necessary. At least for me, it ended up being a necessary part, because now I have empathy and compassion, and I understand how to really break down some of these more complex things, and so people can understand it and then run with it. To have immediate emotional freedom release in a few minutes, which is great. But that was the other thing too. It's like, yeah, then I would get some release, but I didn't know how to maintain it. And that's really where the 1% model came in. So it's all these things of, check in on your friends, especially the one you're like, oh, she's tough. They have it all together. They always figure it out. They're always the one who's the nurturer in the group, the one who's like what I call the earth. So they're very like kumbaya, let's hang out together, let's be about each other, and the ones who actually create the safe space for others, who's creating the safe space for them. And so I became very passionate around this topic because of what I went through. And then that there's so many women, and it's really a lot of us high achievers, because we just learn to do it alone. And we can't. We're created to be interdependent. We're not created to run this life alone. And so that's why I'm so passionate about what I do. And I'm so grateful that I get to serve people around the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that first and foremost. And definitely, I know in like sharing my story also with the loss of my sister, that it has been part of my healing journey. And I think that for whatever reason, I was inclined to share it really from the beginning and not trying to sugarcoat, but it did take me quite a while to get to that point. And it sounds like you being able to really share your story is becoming part of your healing journey so that you can ultimately help others, which I think is so amazing also.
Yeah. And when I was growing up, I had, there was a lot of women in my neighborhood and some of my family. And I'm always careful about this part of the story because it's not all my story to share. But my interpretation, even as a child, was that I needed to be very aware of my surroundings, the kind of, people I was going to hang out with. There was a lot of abuse, all kinds of abuse with the women in our neighborhood, in our community, in our family. And our house was the one where everybody came to heal. So we were the healing house. People would come and wanted to reset their life. They would come and they would stay with us for a while. And then once they were able to, get back on their feet or make the decision of what to do next, then they would go. So as a young child, I saw this about, having to make very tough decisions and, safety. And yet, my inherent personality is very bubbly, very trusting. My mom would say stories that she was always afraid when I was younger, because you know how they'll say, "Oh, come here, baby," and then they want to hug you or something. And I was the kind of child who would just jump into the arms of a stranger. So I had no concept of stranger danger. And so she was always afraid that somebody's going to kidnap me, because I would just go with anybody. Because I was so well loved and protected by my parents that's what I thought all adults were. And so it was then you get older and you start to recognize what's happening around you, and it starts to then color your belief systems about things. And still, in seeing people the way they were abused, that was one of the things that eventually led me not to share. And, because we are taught to put on the brave face, that, to keep the secret. That is not our story to tell in certain things. So when you're seeing abuse, but you're almost encouraged not to talk about it. And if you do, it's in whisper, because we didn't know then who was going to overhear it, and was the abuser then going to take it out even more on who he was abusing, which was sometimes the case. And so we didn't know, will we be putting somebody in danger by talking about it? So it's like having to be muzzled about not speaking around what was really happening in those situations. And even though, thankfully, I was in a house of love and peace and restoration, that's how I grew up. And I saw these women get restored. I saw them get, they became nurses and all these other, amazing professionals, and they have a healthy life now with, wonderful relationships and children and spouses and a whole life. But still, it was in the back, right? When you don't realize how you're being groomed to live your life until later, and you start having the fruit and the harvest of those things. And so I grew up not talking about those things, and came to the point where it's like learning to suppress them so deeply that later on, eventually that stuff comes out. And so that's why I started to learn. And then after these experiences, one of the things I learned was around tapping, which is emotional freedom technique. So it looks like you're tapping at different points in your bodies, and then understanding what's really happening in that process. So you really do have some emotional freedom when you're doing that exercise, because it forces you. The first thing you're doing is you're confronting the negative things. And that was another thing to somebody who's, I'm a Jesus lover. And so we're always, trying to speak positive and the things we want. And even in some circles, right, mindset, it's like you want to speak about the things that you want to happen in your life, but they never really talked about the other side. They have to deal with the negative. And I just was not groomed to deal with the negative. It was like, don't focus on that. And there's a wisdom to that, because what we focus on expands. But at the same time, what's not confronted is not changed. And so you end up doing this trap where, you're going 2 steps forward and then you self-sabotage. So you're doing the dance constantly because we're not confronting those negative things. And so I've really come to embrace the negative thoughts, because now I understand when I catch them, it's grace. That means that my body, my brain, my heart, my soul is ready to deal with that negative thought if it keeps on coming up. And now I have the power, and I've learned the tools to rewire it, to capture it, to make it obedient to what I want it to do. It's like, okay, where is this coming from? Let me rewire that. And that way, when it goes back into my neural pathways, into my brain, it'll start creating a new automatic action. And then, learning, I don't have to have shame around that or guilt around the fact that I'm thinking negative or a negative thought came up. It's actually normal. And so really normalizing your negative thoughts. It's okay. You're okay. There's nothing wrong with you when you have a negative thought. It's just your brain. And when you start to understand how it's kicking off chemicals, it's putting you in chemical bliss or chemical chaos, the more understanding you have, you're like, wait, you mean I'm normal? There's nothing wrong with me? No. You're wonderfully and beautifully made. You just know how you operate. But once you get out, you don't even need much knowledge. Just a little bit can completely transform your life.
Yeah, I mean, wow, there are so many really great nuggets that you said there. And understanding one, like how the brain works and functions, and then how, I mean, even automatic thoughts can roll into all these more like it's that spiral effect, right? Like we have this one thought, which goes to this next thought and the next thought, and then how we can really start to break those cycles and ultimately make the changes that we need. And it's actually easier than we think it's going to be, because it feels like it might be really, really hard. And it all does depend on the experience, the way that you grew up, the circumstances of what's actually happening, and also being told that you shouldn't talk about those things, right? Because you never know who might be around or who might be listening. And that starts to create these beliefs as you grow up also, as like, well, I can't talk about that. I can't say anything because I'm afraid this might happen or this might happen. Again, knowing that it's not always our story to tell, but we have been in those experiences, and knowing that there are people out there that can help us shift those. Like that's pretty cool. And the coolest part from what I heard from you say is that it can be something we can change, right? It can be something that we don't always have to live with. And there are people that can help guide us through that. So I just think that's really amazing, being able to come from that perspective. And what I would love to do, we're going to go to our quick first sponsored break. But when we get back, I want to just talk a little bit more around that. And then really kind of, if you are willing, dive into like your 1% model, because I want to know a little bit more about that, how that works too. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsored break. And this show is sponsored by Raquel Soto with Your GPS for Success. She is a Christ-centered mindset coach who her 1% model helps her clients gain clarity, have a clearer mind, which allows them to make more money and have better relationships.
8 million people die by suicide in the world each year.
One person dies due to suicide every 40 seconds. Have you ever felt completely alone?
Like your life doesn't matter.
You are not alone. Call the National Suicide Lifeline at 988.
Hope and recovery is possible.
You can help too.
With only $19 a month, you help us save lives through mental health and suicide prevention education.
Scan the QR code or go to makementalhealthmatter.org to sign up as a warrior for mental health today.
Hi, I'm Ann Scotland, the host of Global Socialpreneurs. Join the experts, 12 p.m. EST on the Fresh Takes TV network for the best advice on social entrepreneurship. Join us here on E360 TV.
And like that, we're back. So if you happen to be just joining us, thank you so much for watching the Make Mental Health Matter show. My guest today, Raquel, is talking really about her story. So you'll have to go back and watch a little bit more about her story, why she does what she does now. And I know you really were talking about, before we went to break, we were talking about how you were really raised in this community where there was a lot of abuse that happened. You ultimately did try to take your life 4 times, which is something that you didn't necessarily tell anybody. So I did have, well, and now you're starting to share that story a little bit more, which is ultimately helping probably in your healing journey and in the journey of really starting this conversation that maybe wasn't something that you felt like you could share in the past. I'm curious, and so I have a couple questions, but I also want to talk about your model that you use now. But and since the show is really all about like sharing that story, making sure that people don't feel alone in this world. But I'm curious, like when you got to that place that you thought about, or really 4 times you got to this place that you thought that you didn't want life to go on again or anymore. Do you know what kind of like led up to those points, and then what was helpful really in the shift to want to be alive?
It was the internalization of what other people thought I should be doing. And so it would come across as, it would sound like wisdom, because I really would take to heart some things that certain people would say, as I covering the guilty, but you know they're better people now, so I'm trying to be cognizant of that. And growing up with having such a high standard, having to have a high standard of excellence, and I did. I was like a straight A student, and I was valedictorian. I went into high school, had a different kind of experience. I was groomed for what I was walking into. And it was a lot of pressure around performance. And because I was so good, that typical A student, I love studying. I'm still a great student. I think everybody needs to be a great student because there's always more to learn, and to stay open and teachable. And I'm a person who, I love projects. So if I set my mind something is going to get done, it's not an issue if it's when. And having that kind of drive really led itself to then having open opportunities. So like I was saying in the first part of the segment, is that when you're getting a little bit of success, then it feels proof that you're on the right track. And I wasn't really, because I wasn't doing it with the holistic mindset. And that's not something that we talked about back then, of really approaching things in a holistic way so that every part of you is healthy, not just, what you're doing through the work of your hands. And always trying, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like the gift of being excellent, of wanting that. It's a good thing, because that means you're going to be approaching everything through that lens of wanting it to be good, and there's nothing wrong with it. However, like all gifts, right, they also have a kryptonite. What's the other part of that when it's out of balance? And so not understanding that was getting out of balance, and having these criticisms that I was internalizing. And then I was married for a long period of time. I'm in my 50s now. I was married for over 20 years, and he has passed on. He died in 2020. But we were still married at the time. And did he love me until his last breath? Yes, I was still his best friend. I was still his best friend. However, even in that marriage, it sounded like wisdom, and he was much older than I was. So I just took it as a grain of thought, like, well, he's older, so he knows better. And sometimes we give away our power in that way because we haven't been groomed around, again, not that I was critically thinking, but I did admire him. So I even see this in the entrepreneur space. And I see this a lot, where people who are successful, and then people just listen to whatever they say and they take it as though gospel, and it's complete truth and it's absolute truth. And then you see all these like little cult minds happening. We have to be so careful about putting people on pedestals. And I was putting, somebody on a pedestal nobody can be put on a pedestal. Nobody can really be under that weight of it. And so he was a high critical thinker. And I have a lot of clients, actually, that's who I end up attracting. And the beauty of a critical thinker is that we need them, because they're so good at picking the negative parts. They can see the holes in the process. So they're able to save us. I mean, they really save us a lot, from ourselves, if we would listen, if we would pay attention. But what also happens sometimes is that critical thinkers don't know how to balance that out and to deliver that in a way that is not eviscerating the person's spirit or soul. It can come across either negative or it can come across like, there's something wrong with me all the time. So it became this belief system like, there must be something wrong with me. I'm not doing enough, so it came around this, I'm not enough. I'm not doing enough. Even though if you looked at my schedule, even like one of my best-selling things that people like me to talk about is called Task Animal. So it's like, how do you become a task animal so you can reduce your stress and your anxiety? You're using your personality gift clusters so that way you're actually creating your own time by moving at your own created, wired for success pace. But even in that, if you looked at my schedule, people are like, you're so prolific. See, there goes the accolades again. You're so prolific. How do you get so much things done? You're handling 2 different houses, and you have 3 kids, and you have a business, and blah. So again, it looked very successful on the outside, like I had it all together, but inside I was dying because there was so much pressure. Like nothing I do is good enough, and that was coming from my childhood. Nothing I was doing was, even though I had all the stars and rewards and accolades, still there was something of not being good enough. So that was the underlying lie that I was believing, that I wasn't enough, that I had to show up a certain way, that I had to look a certain way, because I was chastised by the way I was speaking, by the way I looked. I mean, I've been chased by people because I'm Puerto Rican, and sometimes people don't know that, or I don't look it, depending on how I feel like looking for that day. So I've had experiences where because of the way I looked or spoke, I was mistreated, or the people around me were mistreated. And so having all those experiences and still trying to look at the silver lining, what can I learn from this? How can I make things better? And not dealing with the negative things. And so those were all the things that were happening in the back end. And I wasn't one of those who I was thinking of committing, unaliving myself. I actually was in the process of those 4 times when I was stopped. And so what really stopped it was the last time when I was stopped, I just said, God, I promise you, I won't try to take my life again, but you're going to have to help me. I don't understand why I keep on coming into this deep, dark place where at that point, I had 3 children already who I adore, and we have an amazing relationship. And even then, they're like, why would you want to end it when you have all these people who love you? And I did. I have people who saw me for who I was and loved me, but yet didn't know the pain that I was in. And really, it was self-inflicted because of the false belief systems that I had about myself. And because of that, the last time I was just like, you're going to have to help me figure out how I never come to this place again. And if when I start feeling that again, I need some tools. Like, what do I do? Like, what I've learned is not working. What I've learned, you have to stop me 4 times. I can't keep on rolling the dice that I'm going to listen, or I'm going to allow the stopping on the 5th or 6th or 7th. And so it was really that was a turning point for me. It was just really making the decision of, and I had this glimpse of how my children would look like if I went through with it, and my parents and my sister, who I knew adored me. And then it was just this sense of like, if you do this, you'll be fine because I'll be with God, but they won't. He's like, they will never recover. And that broke my heart. He's like, your pain will end. They will carry that for the rest of their lives. And at that point, that's when I decided I can't. No matter how I'm feeling about myself, I have to find a way to process these emotions in a healthy way and to create healthy boundaries. So that actually is what opened up the door to learn about mindset and neuroscience, emotional regulation, and the things that I was not groomed with, that I didn't even know really existed. Becoming a mindset coach, I was just doing what I normally do helping somebody. And she was sobbing and she looked at me and she said, how much do I owe you? And I said, you can get paid for this? I didn't even know it was something that I can do. And I loved it. I was doing it all the time naturally. And it wasn't until somebody actually wanted to throw money at me that I didn't realize that it was just something that I can do. I can actually do what I love and get paid for it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know it's not always easy to tell our stories, but I really appreciate you sharing. And I know, I mean, personal experience from the loss of my sister, that it is something that, you know, it's not selfish by any means. It's actually selfless. And it's one of those, like, I mean, you had to have that moment of like, I can't be in this cycle anymore. I can't do this anymore. Like, something needs to change, but I need help to get to that place. And I think that's just amazing that you realized and were like, something's got to change. Like, you've got to help me get through this, and whatever that looks like, right? And then opening up your heart to the possibilities, which I think is just a really amazing place to get to. And then transferring it into helping others, which I think is even just another level up of like the selflessness of what you're really doing now is, hey, I've been there, I've done that. Like, I have my experience, but I also want to help others through this journey. And I'm going to go get myself trained, and I'm going to learn all the things that I possibly can to just really fully understand what it means and how I can truly help to, you know, give that support and get paid for it too, which is, you know, that added bonus. But I just want to say thank you for sharing your experience and what was helping you to get to that point, and also now what you do. We're going to go to our quick last sponsored break, but once we get back, I would love for you to just share really truly around that 1%. Like, what does that mean? Because I've heard the 1% phrase in the past, but I know that they're all different. So I'd love to hear that from you. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsored break.
1,917 people die daily from suicide globally.
I lost my middle sister, Kelli, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
How does Make Mental Health Matter save lives?
Number 1. Awareness.
My story, all over it, isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction. And because of Kelli and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here. And if it wasn't for Kelli answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
Number 2. Conversation.
I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community. It is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like, you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelli, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were, and I just appreciate the question because it is different, and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Number 3. Education.
Kelli's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, and the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelli's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually. And her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you to check it out.
Like that, we're back again. All right. So, we were just chatting about really your story specifically, Raquel, and thank you again for sharing that. I know it brings up a lot of emotions, so thank you for being vulnerable and allowing those to really show through. And I know that with your shifting of like, I can't be in this cycle anymore, I need help, you've got to help me get through this, you have shifted into really this Christ-centered coaching mindset coaching backwards. But you really talk about this 1% model. Can you share a little bit more, like, what does that mean specifically?
It's really taking 1% of your day, and it's all about the framing of things, because we all believe a story. We're just living out our belief systems. Is just a story that we believe, and so we can choose to believe a new story by ourselves, but sometimes we need some understanding. And so what came to me is like, okay, people are so busy. I do hypnosis and write journals and guided meditations and affirmations, and I do those kinds of things with my clients. However, I have so many busy professionals that come to me. It's like, how can I speed up the process? We always want to speed up the process. And so it's like, okay, I developed this thing called the 1%. So 1%, that's where you start. It's 1% of your day, which is actually less than 15 minutes, but which sounds better and feels better in your body. 15 minutes, and you're like, I don't have 15 minutes. I don't even have 5. Especially, I also have moms with little kids, and they're like, I've had the little kids, and you're in the bath, they're trying to escape just to be by yourself for 5 minutes, and they're putting the little hands to the door, like, what are you doing in there? So what do you do? So I developed these methods to help you to rewire your brain in 1% or less. So I've developed something with a client of mine. So I'm sending out something for you to help you to wire, and it takes like 7 minutes. So a lot of my clients are actually just rewiring their brain as 7 minutes or less a day, so which is a half of a percentage. So it helps you to be consistent, because what we're doing now about neuroscience, people tell you about these habits, like, oh, it's 21 days. Well, no. Not really. It takes 21 days to start to get neural pathways, and it's about 62 days to start developing it. And it's after 90 days, every single day, that it becomes a lifestyle change. So how do you have a lifestyle change where you have actual transformation? It's in rapidly rewiring your brain. And there's a lot of things around, like, oh, do it when you first wake up or right before you go to sleep. Well, that wasn't working for me because I need to ease into my day, and I didn't really want to start doing anything. So I tried it. It just didn't work for my personality. And then at night, I would just forget it again, not working with my personality. So I'm like, this is not working for me, Jesus. I need something new. And so it's like, oh, then I learned about awareness. And I said, that's why I was saying in the other segment that allowing the negative thoughts to come up, because awareness is grace. And then I found out, it's like, okay, when you have that awareness, like, oh, your brain is almost like unlocking. You have about 4 hours where your brain is like, what are we going to do about this? And what happens is that most times people will just agree with the negative thought. So when it goes back to your brain and then creating the neural pathway, right? So your brain is running 95% of actions on automatic pilot. It is your best friend, and it'll trip you up at the same time. Because it's not keeping you safe. That's another lie, that your brain is keeping you safe. No, it's keeping you contained within your own belief system. So negative thought, you catch it, you're like, wait, that's a negative thought. Then that's awareness, that's grace. And then it's like, what are we going to do about this? So what people don't understand or know is that every 10 seconds, your brain is checking in with you, saying, what do you think about you? What do you think about what's going on? And then whatever you take a thought says, oh, is that what we're doing? Let me drive you there. So when you connect thought, you're like, wait, I don't want that. And then you can do a couple of things like either affirmations or journal prompts or an EFT. There's so many different methods that I work with my clients depending on their personality, right? Because I want it to be consistent for them. And then just do it for a few minutes. So when it goes back to your brain, it starts to create those new neural pathways, which is what we want. Because that way, those automatic thoughts, we think there's something wrong with us when these negative things come up. It's like, no, that's just your brain. It's, it has to keep alive. It's diagnosed to repair itself. But another thing I learned was that your brain follows the voice of your mind. But what is that? It's your mindset. So every 10 seconds, it's trying to figure out what is your mindset saying now? Every 10 seconds. And it's also trying to process all this data. And when I was doing the numbers, because I'm running the numbers, that's over 15 billion bits of data that is trying to do something with every single day. So what is that? It's like it's almost 2 gigabytes. It's 1.875 gigabytes of information it's trying to do something with. So that's why when you're trying to do a goal, you're like, why can't I stay consistent? You don't have a procrastination issue. You have a belief issue. And if you fix the negative issue, the belief, the underlying lie, and that's what I do with my clients, trying to find the lie that you're believing, and then we rewire it. But that's the 1%. When it comes up saying, oh, wait, I'm catching that. Gotcha. Where did that come? Even ask a question, where did that come from? Some people are verbal processors. And so even asking out loud, where is that coming from? I believe that. I mean, like questioning the negative thought. Why do I think that's true for me? Because it's just a circumstance. We can't control the circumstances or some of the results. But what we can control 100% is the thoughts that we choose to entertain, because they're going to go off with emotions. And those emotions is what drives the actions. So if we can catch it at the root, people are trying to fix the emotional part, or they're trying to do all these strategies and tactics. But that's why they have to cha-cha, because they're not hitting the root. It comes up. That's when you can rewire it. That's the grace. That's the opportunity for you to do what your brain is there to do, to be your helper. So that way, over time, consistently, you're doing it every single day, you will have a different life in 90 days because your belief system would be changing. And the neuroscientists call it like the forest. You look at a forest, your brain looks like a little forest. The trees, right? Trees of the mind. And so we have these erroneous belief systems. And it's like they melt down and you're planting something at the same time. So you're doing both by confronting the negative thing and then replacing it with what you want. What is it that you actually want to believe? What is the story that you want to live in? Because you're already doing it by default. But when you understand this, you do it now by design. You can choose to take 1%, which sounds better than 15 minutes or less, and really like dream into it. There's different tactics. One of them is dreaming into it. What does your dream life look like, feel like? You can write about it. You use how you're wired to learn, and then use that for yourself and start into that life. Because your brain doesn't know the difference between your imagination and reality. It doesn't. It thinks it's real. And how do I prove that to you? Start thinking about somebody who pissed you off in the last argument you had. You're like, oh, I should have told this, and you're getting mad all over again. And then, your emotions are flaring up. Why? Because you're thinking about something that actually no longer exists. The past and the future do not exist. Only a mental construct. But see how you can get really pissed off really fast? Or you can think about like the last time your bestie made you laugh, and that conversation, and how much your body hurt and how you were crying. And then you could just remember those jokes again, and it automatically is putting you in a good mood. Why? Because your brain is like, this is what we're thinking about. Every thought has a chemical signature. So now you just went from going from chemical chaos to chemical bliss. Your brain is your drug dealer, your medicine man. It's like, oh, now I'm in a good mood. This person is so funny. This is why I keep them around. They don't really know how to get me out of myself. And just like that, you're just remembering. But that has such a strong connection that it actually shifts your mood. There's all these like little tricks, and we know them. When we hear them, like, yeah, oh yeah. But we don't have a system in place to be consistent in it. And that's really where everything's at. It's like creating a system where you're wired to succeed, so it's easy to stick to over a little bit of time. You actually will think differently, and because you're thinking differently, naturally, organically, automatically, then the decisions you're going to make are going to be in alignment with actually what you want, and you will stop self-sabotaging yourself in that area.
Wow. No, the brain is so fascinating to me, and I love like everything you're talking about, and I could talk to you for hours about this. So I just think it's so interesting and fun and entertaining. But I know we're coming to the end, unfortunately. So I want you to just share a little bit. If anybody wants to reach out to you, they want to find you, they want to work with you, what is the best place for them to go?
They can just go to my landing page, which is yourgpsforsuccess.net. And right there is like any events that I'm going to have, and how to work with me, how to find me on socials. It's like a link tree, so you can just go ahead and venture connect with me there.
Amazing. And for those of you that are watching, there is a QR code right above Raquel that you can scan that will take you directly to her page. Anybody that is listening, it is your GPS4 success.net. Raquel, this was so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your experience and really letting us get to know you. I so appreciate you being on the show today.
Thank you for the invitation. I really believe that somebody took at least one thing, everybody who's listening or watching, that you can just run with. And that's good enough for me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And maybe I'll have you back and we'll geek out on the brain another time.
Yes, that would be so fun. I say yes to that.
Yay. All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. I don't know about you, but again, like I said, I just love the brain, how we can start to change and shift whatever our experiences. Like Raquel said, is that we go through life. We have these situations that happen, whether it's when we're younger or when we're older, and it kind of conditions us to believe whatever that is we're grown up with. So she gave some really great examples of how our mind can play tricks on us. We can literally be recycling what just happened and making ourselves mad, or we could shift into, oh, I remember these memories about my best friend, and it starts to make you happy and giggle. And our brain is that powerful. That's the coolest part, is that we have choice of which direction we want to go. I know in those moments that maybe you are in this mad state and you're like, no, I'm going to hold on to this because this is like my baby blanket. But you have a choice to stay there. You can either stay in that madness or the chaos or whatever you want to call it, or you can shift and say, you know, I'm done. I don't want to hang on to this anymore. I'm going to let it go. And I'm going to recall that one time when I had the most amazing conversation, or I watched the most amazing show that gave me some pointers around how I can just let that go. And I'm going to decide at this moment that I'm going to be happy instead of mad. That's the cool part about being human. The cool part about this thing that we call life is that we have that choice. You also have the choice to make sure you come back next week and watch another episode. I just want to also shout out Raquel for, again, sponsoring this episode. You can find her at it's YOURGPSFOR success SUCCESS.net, your GPS for success.net. And her 1% model helps her clients gain clarity, have a clear mind, which allows them to make more money and have better relationships. And who doesn't want more money? I know I do. So no matter what you do, make sure you come back next week, because I promise you I have another awesome guest and you won't want to miss it. I'll see y'all next week.